Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Polyvagal Institute. We're excited to welcome you to our community and are so happy that you've joined us for the first event in our free community series, A New Year's Journey to Self-Care. Each week, we'll be offering a free polyvagal informed event to support self-care. Today, we will be practicing somatic touch to support your nervous system with Kristen Toth. First, we're going to get started with a little bit of introductions, and then I'll pass it over to Kristen. My name is Susie Cavassa. I'm the COO here at the Polyvagal Institute. And online with me today, we have Jerry Maciola, our media director, and Mac Paulus, our marketing and communications specialist. We'll be in the back end, just kind of supporting your guys' experience here. For those of you who are new to the Polyvagal Institute, I'd like to share a little bit about us. We're an international nonprofit based here in the US with a mission of creating a safe and connected world through polyvagal principles. We provide education, training, and resources to a global audience of learners, and are really excited that you're here to join us today. If you haven't had a chance, I'd really recommend you check out our website at polyvagal.org. There's some great resources in addition to other free community events like this one. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will be recording this session. So this session and any future sessions, if someone misses a live event, we'll have it, email it out to participants 48 hours after the event. We will be taking questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and we'll take those questions as time allows at the end. But please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. For cameras, we encourage you to turn on your camera if you feel comfortable. However, we do ask that you keep your mic off or muted throughout the webinar so that all attendees can hear the presentation. And last but not least, we do have closed captioning. It's available via Zoom. So you may turn on your captions using the settings at the bottom of the screen. I think if you hit the more, the ... more, you'll be able to see closed caption settings. Now it is my distinct honor to introduce our presenter today, Kristen Toth. Kristen, thank you so much for being here with us today. Kristen is a somatic educator, coach, and SSP provider who helps people regulate their nervous systems and cultivate embodied safety to heal from trauma and stress. And I, for one, I have to say, I'm so excited you're here today, Kristen. I'm on my own self-care journey in January. So I'm ready to kick it off with some somatic touch. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, Susie, and thanks to everyone for showing up today. It's really wonderful to see so many faces, and I'm really happy to be here to start this series of self-care events at the start of the year. And what I want to do today is to lead us through a somatic practice that I hope feels nourishing and comforting for your nervous system. And I also hope that it feels simple enough for you to remember it and to be able to practice it on your own if it feels good and supportive in some way after we get to experience it here together. That's one of the times when I think somatic practices can be especially powerful, when we use them as regular tools for our own self-care over time. So we're going to offer our nervous system some cues of safety through some gentle self-touch. And touch is a language that our nervous system understands really, really well. Most of our touch receptors in our body are located in our skin. And our skin and our nervous system develop from the same single layer of cells when we're an embryo. That's how intimately connected they are and how early that connection begins. So touch that is kind, touch that is compassionate and respectful helps our nervous system regulate. It helps our nervous system shift toward more of that ventral vagal state of safety. And when we're in more of a ventral state, that's when we feel more present and more connected and more ourselves and more at ease. It doesn't mean that we feel completely worry-free or that we feel like everything's okay or that everything is okay. But what being in more of a ventral state does is it helps us feel present and capable of handling and being with whatever it is that's here. So we're going to be practicing using the neural pathways that help to make that possible. And the more we travel those pathways, the more they become familiar to our body, the more those pathways become embodied, and the more they become automatic just as we go through our regular days. So I'm going to be inviting you to do some things with me and try some things out. And I only want you to try them if they feel right. If anything that I'm inviting or suggesting doesn't feel right or good, if it feels off or you're not sure about it, you do not have to do it at all. I want to be really clear that you are the authority on your body and your nervous system, not me. No matter what experience I have or what knowledge I have, you know what's best for your nervous system. And I'm just inviting some possibilities for you to try out and see how they get to be received by your system. So most of the time, a practice like this is going to be settling in some way for a lot of people. But if for any reason you're going along in the practice and you start to feel like even a whisper of agitation or anxiety or overwhelm, then I want to be really clear that you have permission to pause and to stop. You have permission to do something different or follow a different impulse that your body is moving toward, even if it's not exactly what I'm suggesting. You can always pause and just listen to my words. You can just watch the screen, even if you're not actually doing the practice, and know that your nervous system will still be receiving the experience in some way through your mirror neurons. So you have all the permission in the world to do whatever it is your body needs. And I hope you'll try some things out, and I hope they feel supportive in some way. So the first thing that I'm going to invite you to do is to check in with yourself and your body and just to see what's happening and here and present right now. Because if we're doing a practice to support us shifting into more of a ventral state, we want to know what we're shifting from, right? We want to know our starting place. So in whatever way feels right, whether it's with your eyes open or your eyes closed, just imagine turning toward your present moment experience and just getting curious about what's here now. What's here and present and alive for you, physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically, any of those ways. Just taking a few moments to notice what's here. And even as we pause to notice what's here, that is sending a cue of safety to our nervous system. Because pausing to notice what's here isn't possible when we're in actual danger. So pausing and noticing, how are things for you right now in this moment? And if you want to go kind of one step further and name what it is you're noticing, then you can do that. So maybe there's a word or a couple words or a phrase or a metaphor that feels like it kind of captures something about your experience right now. And if there is, and that comes easily, you can just name to yourself, I'm here and I'm sensing agitation, or I'm here and I'm noticing that I feel fairly settled, or my mind is racing, or whatever it is. Pausing and noticing and naming what's here. And if you're here live and you want to drop into the chat anything about what you're noticing and naming, then you're welcome to right now. It can be nice to know what else is present here with other humans and other nervous systems in the group. There might be similarities. There will probably be some differences. Curious, tired, content, gratitude, cold, discouraged, anxious, tension, riding the waves. Yeah, lots of things in the mix. So some of what you're noticing might be pleasant, some might be unpleasant, some might be neutral. There's probably a mix even in you. We are rarely just one thing, right? Yeah, so can you acknowledge and validate that this is part of what's happening for you right now, right? This is part of the practice, meeting ourselves and connecting with ourselves a little bit more in this way. Whenever we move toward more connection, we're moving toward more of a ventral state. And so you can acknowledge whatever it is that's here. And if you want to, you might consider the practice, the physical practice that we're about to do, as kind of an offering to whatever is showing up right now. This is a gift to our experience. This is a gift or an offering to our body or to our nervous system. And we get to see how it wants to be received. So we'll do a similar check-in toward the end of the practice when we're done. But let's move into doing a few things. And we are going to be doing things, right? I'm going to suggest things for you to do. But I want to emphasize with somatic practices that when we place the focus on being with our body, these are ways to be with our body as opposed to things to do to our body, then that kind of shifts the tone. Yeah, so I'm going to show you things to do, but we're going to use them as ways to be with. And so we're going to be offering some touch. I'll be inviting some touch for our bodies that has a quality of what we might describe as deep pressure touch. Deep pressure doesn't mean painful, right? Deep pressure touch, you can think of when it's regulating, is kind of like a good, solid, warm hug, like the best hug you could imagine, right? And we can do like the somatic experiencing self hug, which is really great. But we're gonna offer a similar sort of quality of touch to our arms and to our low legs, if that feels right today. And we're gonna start with our arms. We're gonna work with one side and then the other. And I'm gonna scoot back just a little bit so you can see me a little easier. Apologize for adjusting my screen. Yeah. And so we're going to begin with our arms, and you can have your arms in whatever position feels comfortable as you're able to do the contact. There may be times where I'm holding up my arm, but you don't have to hold yours up if I'm doing that. It's just so you can see in a different way. And what I'll invite is for us to choose one hand that's going to do the touching. And we can let that hand begin to rest on top of the wrist of the opposite hand. And just to let our fingers and our thumb gently wrap around the wrist and giving our wrist a gentle squeeze, like a good warm hug. So sometimes I call these hand hugs. You might also call them gentle squeezes or embracing squeezes. And then just like you slowly began to give a gentle squeeze, you're going to slowly loosen that. And then we can slide that touch just to the next part of our arm. Because we can't hug the whole arm at once, we've got to hug it in segments. And so that's what we're going to be doing to start off. And you might follow the pace that I'm going at. You can certainly choose a different pace if it feels right. And I'm going to say a few things as we continue to gently squeeze and then to release and to move. So we slowly move up this one arm. This gentle squeeze shouldn't feel straining or painful or gripping at all. If it does, go lighter. We want the touch, for a deep pressure touch, to feel firm enough for the body to know that touch is here, that I'm here, right? I've got you. It's kind of like we're saying that to our body. And as you move up towards your elbow, I'll invite you to come kind of to the outside of the elbow, the pointy part of the elbow to do the squeeze, as opposed to the inside part of the elbow. So gentle squeeze around the bony part of the elbow. Squeeze and then release. And then moving up the upper arm. And I tend to stay toward the outer arm as opposed to inner arm here. So more toward the top or the outside. Yeah. Again, we want to do this with as much comfort as possible. So if this position is causing stress to your thumb or your thumb can always be in line with your fingers. It doesn't have to be wrapping around. And as you move up toward the shoulder with me, you can pay attention to the quality of your touch. See if you can let it be kind. Can this be a kind touch? A gentle touch? Even as we come up to the shoulder joint, what is this touch communicating to the body? Can it communicate care, kindness? And if that feels like a stretch, can it communicate respect, right? I'm respecting my body enough to give it its time. And once you get up to the top, then you might just offer a gentle sweeping touch down to the wrist before you move off. And then you might see if it feels right to try that again with me. We're going to do the same side before we go to the other side. And we're going to start in the same place, right at the wrist. So gently placing hand at the wrist. We don't want any of this to be abrupt. And we're intentionally going slowly. And then gently releasing and sliding, moving to the next part of the arm. This kind of touch sensation, deep pressure touch, tends to not only support nervous system regulation, but it supports a sense of containment. And containment is our felt sense of being held in our experience. This containment is something that all of us need, and we ideally should get a ton of when we're children. The experience of both physically and emotionally feeling held by a grounded, solid presence. And so we're showing up with touch, with some presence for ourselves. And as you continue, moving your gentle squeezes up your arm, you might notice what else is happening in your body, if that feels okay to pay attention to. You might sense what your breath is doing. Notice that you're still breathing. Breathing is happening even when you don't think about it. You might sense that there's support underneath you, either from a chair or couch or bed or floor. And then as you get to the shoulder, once you get to gentle squeeze at the shoulder, then you can offer a gentle sweeping brushing touch down the whole arm. I saw a comment briefly that someone keeps yawning. Yawning is a good indication that there is shifts happening in the nervous system. So if you're yawning, I'm not taking it as you being bored. I hope you're not. Right, yawning in somatic work is often a compliment. It means that something is happening. We're going in a more regulated direction. Yeah. And so before you go to the other side, you might just check and see what you notice in your body, support underneath you, breath inside you. If anything feels more settled or spacious, you might notice how that one arm does or doesn't feel different than the other arm. And if it feels right, we can move over to the second arm and begin to do the same thing. So gently placing hand over top of wrist, warm, sweet squeeze, and then gently releasing as we move to the next segment. Again, I'm finding myself holding my arm up so you can see better, although you can see even if it's down. But see, as you're offering these squeezes, can the rest of your body be relaxed, more relaxed in some way? Can there be less effort in how your body is showing up right now? Is there anything about these gentle squeezes that feels like it's giving a little bit more permission for your nervous system to settle, to rest, and to receive the relative safety that's actually here? And again, when we move to the elbow, we can gently squeeze the outer part, pointy part of the elbow before we start going up the upper arm. Oh, and your eyes can be open or closed for this. Neither is right or wrong. And they may want to alternate between the two. Sometimes having eyes closed allows us to pay better attention to what's happening inside. Sometimes that kind of attention feels like too much, so it's good for us to have our eyes softly open to anchor into the space around us as we connect with our body. Coming up to the shoulder. One last gentle squeeze before we brush all the way down to the wrist. And then see if you want to do that again. Starting at the wrist. And yes, this is intended to be repetitive and simple. The nervous system likes repetition. It likes to get the same messages of safety consistently and predictably. Yeah, this is one of the ways that we can build trust and familiarity with our body. And sometimes with practices like these, we may see quick videos and we like try something like this really fast and like it doesn't do anything. It doesn't really land because safety for a lot of our nervous systems can take time to land, right? And so it's good when we can give it that time, like we're doing right now. I'm not tracking the chat, but I'm seeing things randomly and someone's asking, can we do this for another person or just for ourselves? You can absolutely do this with another person with their permission and consent, of course. It can be a lovely thing this can be a lovely type of touch for grown-ups to offer little ones, especially before going to sleep. Only what feels good, only what feels right. Giving the other person absolute permission to say stop or say no. Just like you, with your body, can stop or say no to this at any time. You might even sense right now, as we're doing this practice and you're following along with me, how you have choice. in whether you do this or not, whether you pause, how strong or not strong your squeezes are. Then when you get up to the shoulder, brushing all the way down to the wrist and off. And then what we're going to do, if you want to continue, and I'll pause here because you might want to check in with your nervous system and just sense, does this feel like enough right now? Does this feel like enough? Because if it feels like enough, then it can be enough. And you can still hang out and you can listen and you can watch, and maybe you'll want to jump back in. But for some of you, this might feel like enough. If you want to try out a little bit more, then what you can do with me is I'm going to scoot back a tiny bit more and adjust my screen just a tad. We can offer the same quality of touch to our lower extremities. And so I'm going to invite us offering it from the ankle up to the knee. You can do it all the way up to the hip, but just in the interest of time, we're going to go from ankle to knee if you want to with me. And you can position your body in whatever way it feels possible for you to make contact with your low leg. So for me, I'm sitting and I have one leg crossed over where my ankle is over my knee. And so we can then let one or both hands come to the front or top of our ankle and give a gentle squeeze there. Or you can have one hand kind of toward the front and one hand on the other side, so there's a more all-encompassing squeeze. Whatever feels easeful for your body. And then just like we did up the arm, gently releasing that squeeze and bringing it up to the next segment of the low leg. Letting the touch be kind, warm, not straining. And notice how this is. If there's anything that doesn't feel good or right about making contact with your legs, you don't have to. You can go back and repeat this with the arms, or you can just pause and listen. And then when we come up to the knee, gonna come up to the front of the knee as opposed to behind the knee, and just give a gentle squeeze around this knee joint. Some people have knee pain, and then we can just like give some extra love to the knee if that's the case. I mean, you can give extra love to your knee regardless, but yeah. And then gentle sweeping touch down the low leg. And we'll do that one more time. If you want to with me, starting at the ankle, gentle squeeze and release. And I'm using two hands, so I'm actually covering more area, right, at once than is possible when we're working with the arms. Maybe that's happening with you too. And notice as you continue these gentle squeezes, if there's anything in you that settles, sinks into your chair or couch or bed even more. How is this landing with your nervous system? How does your body feel about receiving this touch? Is there anything about it it wants to be different? If there is, can you make that adjustment? Sweeping down that low leg, and then we'll switch to the other side. So I'm just switching the cross of my own legs and bringing my hands on the front of my ankle to give embracing squeeze or hand hug to this part of my body. And if you don't know where to place your attention, you can place it on the part of your leg that's being touched. You can place it on the surface of your hands that are doing the touching. You can let it be with your soft gaze just right in front of you. Or a lot of times, I'm surprised I didn't mention this sooner, but a lot of times when I'm doing this kind of practice, there's something that feels good about letting my eyes watch my hands as they're making contact. I don't have any explanation for it. It's just something I've found that my nervous system likes. And it feels grounding to watch myself making contact with my body. And then coming up to the knee, front of the knee, gentle squeeze. And then sweeping down. And coming back to the ankle and going up the leg one more time if that feels right. Finding the pressure feels just right for you. We're talking about this as deep touch pressure, but deep is relative. Yeah. So the nervous system registers very subtle information. So your touch doesn't actually have to be really deep and really uh, profound in order for the nervous system to register for it. In order for the nervous system to register it, this kind of embracing squeeze can be lighter, but that quality of kind of gently sinking in and staying with a place is part of what contributes to that deep touch sensation. So it's okay if your embracing squeezes aren't super deep. You also might find that your legs want a different type of embrace or pressure than your arms did. And you can offer that if that feels possible. Coming up to the knee. One last squeeze. And then gently sweeping down and off. And then rearranging or repositioning your body however you want or need. I'm shifting in my own chair and I'm going to scoot back a bit closer to the screen. And as I do, I'm going to invite y'all to check in again. To take a moment with your eyes open or closed to notice what's here and what's present now. Mentally, physically, emotionally. What's here, what's different, what's alive. We're pausing to notice. And if you want, just like you did before, you can name anything about what you're noticing. And some of you already are sharing that in a chat, so thank you for all of that. More settled, more calm, lighter. Definitely feel more integrated, more settled, reassured. One side of my body was more open to the deep pressure than the other. Great noticing. What does that mean? I have no idea. We don't have to figure it out, right? This is part of us connecting with our body. Doesn't mean we always have to make sense of it, but we can get curious about it and we can respond to it, right? Settled, grounded, more relaxed, more aware, tingly, safe, sleepy, more grounded, less burning feeling. I was touching very lightly, but it still made a huge difference for me. Lovely. Sleepy, more present, release of tension. I can give myself the desired touch. Beautiful. Yeah, this is part of what self-care is about. This doesn't mean that we don't need touch and care from other people. We absolutely do, right? We know that from polyvagal theory. We need other people. And we can also offer this kind of touch and care to ourselves. And it helps. It's supportive. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. So, Susie, we're at the end of our practice. Do you want to offer any questions that you were tracking in the chat or in the Q&A?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Kristen. My nervous system feels a little more settled for sure. We do have a couple questions. So one of them is regarding the hand exercise that we did, or the arm exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
is there, should we start with the hands, or is there a reason why we don't include the hands in the arm exercise?
You can't, there's not a specific reason why I didn't include the hands. Uh, Aside from they're a little harder to like give a hug to without kind of compressing in a weird way, right? So that kind of sensation can be uncomfortable for some people. But if something about starting with on the top of the hands feels good and right for you, then I would include that.
Okay, thank you. I noticed for me when I just tried to do it, if you have rings, that could be something that squeezes
Yeah.
in a
So option that's up to you.
Okay, and we have another question here from Lisa. Is the sequencing activating the sympathetic nervous system?
Um, I feel curious to know a little bit more about where that question is coming from. The things that come to mind to say is that, the sympathetic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that mobilizes us, right? And so when the sympathetic nervous system is accompanied by ventral safety, then that mobilization can translate to a feeling of more aliveness, right? Or more energy or more vibrancy. And so that might, if that is an experience that someone's having as a result of this practice, then that's totally possible. This type of somatic practice isn't actively trying to recruit the sympathetic nervous system, right? We're intending more of a shift toward the parasympathetic, which
Mm,
includes ventral, which ventral vagal, the safe and connected state, is part of. And also dorsal vagal is part of parasympathetic as well. And what the dorsal is what allows us to feel restful when it's accompanied by enough ventral energy. So this practice is not intended to recruit or stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. But if you were already feeling a little sympathetic and then we brought more ventral in, then you might have the experience of feeling more energy or more alive or more attentive or something like that.
thank you. I think that explained it very well. Thank you.
Right.
We have another question here. Is it normal to feel nervous at times and have to adjust pressure?
While doing the practice, is it normal to feel nervous at times during the practice? Well,
Mhm.
all sorts. I love normalizing all sorts of responses to these kinds of practices, right? Because our nervous systems are unique and individual, and there's really very little that surprises me when people say, I did this practice and then I felt this, right? It's like I'm pretty much never shocked. And so if you experience what you're naming as nervousness during this practice or a practice like this, then I would kind of put that in the category of a little bit of sympathetic activation, right? It's like a little hint of agitation or slight hint of overwhelm or something like that. And so that can come up, right? And if it's at a level that doesn't feel overwhelming, then it might be something that you notice and you get curious about, and you say, well, it feels right to continue to this, and I'm not trying to push through it. And then maybe what happens is that nervousness settles a little bit. And then you get to notice that, oh, like activation went up a little bit and now it just came down. And so now I'm experiencing a regulation in my nervous system, right? I would say if you're doing a practice and nervousness comes up and then it starts to grow and then it continues, then those would all be signs to pause or to stop or to slow down. They might be indications that you've done enough or that your body needs something different. It doesn't mean that anything is like going wrong or that there's anything wrong with you, though.
Thank you. We have lots of questions, so I'm excited. I'm kind of going.
Okay.
So I'm going to apologize to everybody if we don't get to all of them, but I'm trying to get to ones that we didn't touch on. Someone asked, and we did cover it, there will be a recording of this sent out. So just so you all know, there will be a recording. Okay, here is another one. What is your definition of being in your body? It can often feel more complicated than it really is to me sometimes. So I was just curious about your thoughts about that.
Well, I agree that being in your body is a complicated experience, um, right? And I think we can be in our body to all sorts of different degrees, right? Um, in this kind of somatic practice and nervous system work, the curiosity for me becomes around what is it like for me to be in my body? Like what registers like that for me? I can tell you when I feel in my body or embodied, I feel a sense of my physical presence as connected to my attention, my awareness, my emotions, right? When I feel in my body, I sense myself as a being that's here in this room having a whole world of experiences inside of me, right? And so that might mean that I'm aware of physical sensations, but being embodied doesn't just include physical sensations, right? There's a whole felt sense experience. And so how are we relating with that, right? My experience is that when we're more in a ventral vagal state, autonomic state, it's more comfortable hanging out here in our body as opposed to being somewhere in our mind that's kind of disconnected from what's happening right here and right now. So I love the question, and it's something that we could like talk about for hours, but I hope that gives a few maybe different thoughts.
Thank you. Thank
Mm.
you. There's another question about the direction of the significance of the direction that we move with our touches.
hmm Yeah, I can say something about that. So in this practice, um, we moved from the wrists up to the shoulders, right? Why did we do that? One of the reasons that we did that is because when we feel emotional intensity, we tend to feel that in the core of our body, right? The big feelings that we have happen in our core. So when we're looking to make contact with the body and interface with this whole experience, sometimes the body can feel safer with that beginning more at a distance and then slowly approaching the core of the body, right? So the wrist or hands are at a greater distance from the core than our shoulder is. So it's kind of like we're walking up to the doorstep before we go all the way into the house, right? And so would it be wrong or bad for you to do it the other way, do it from the shoulder to the wrist? No, not at all. You can try that and see how it feels for you. But that's my intention around providing this sequence in that way.
Okay, and there's also a question about the sweeping off at
The
the end.
sweeping.
Hmm.
Sorry if I misunderstood
No, no,
that.
no, there's both questions,
Hmm.
so I got
Yeah, so the sweeping in that direction, like from the core and out, um, is the direction that tends to be more comfortable to bodies in general. And you can think about it like Um, if you're petting a dog or a cat, you tend to pet them in the direction that their hair is growing.
Mm,
You pet them the other way, right? If you pet a dog from the tail up to the head, that gives them a different experience. Doesn't mean they won't like it, but it generally tends to be less reliably soothing to
mm,
the dog body or to the human body, right? So down and out is the direction that our hair grows in. You can think about it that way since we're working with touch. So there's a little bit of reasoning around that. The opposite way is not wrong.
mhm. Yeah, I noticed this feels nice, the sweeping.
Mhm.
There's another question. Is the practice something that you would encourage someone to do in response to dysregulation or as a daily practice to build resilience?
That's a great question. This kind of practice can be used for both situations, depending on what you have the time and space and availability for. When I teach somatic practices, I talk about using them in both ways. We can use practices responsively in that we're using them to respond to dysregulation or a moment of discomfort to offer our system cues of safety in the moment, assuming that we actually are safe, right? To help remind our body and let our nervous system register that like safety is actually here and
Mm,
it's safe enough to settle. And it's really great to use practices when we don't need them. Deb Dana talks a lot about, she doesn't do somatic practices, but with all of her polyvagal practices and work, she talks about building patterns when we don't need them, so they're there when we do. Yeah. So using this kind of practice when we're feeling like pretty okay is a way to start to build capacity and greater resilience in our nervous system and start to build patterns of connection as opposed to encouraging patterns of protection that aren't necessary.
mhm. Thank you. There's a couple comments or questions about feelings that came up for people in doing some of the practices. One of the questions, is it common to experience tears and sadness
Mhm.
during touch? And the other one that's kind of related is, why might I be getting tired or feeling
Mm,
shut down? So kind of the different feelings that come up for folks during the touch practice.
yeah, so um, yeah, those two responses feel related to me in some way, although they we can experience them independently. When we start offering the body more safety that it can register, sometimes the first place that it goes is kind of a place of a little bit of relief and a little bit of rest. It's almost like we can be sending the body signals that like, oh, all of the stuff that you've been trying to hold together and this like baseline of tension of just like keep going and manage things and do the things and then we offer safety and it's like, oh, oh, I can breathe a little bit or I can settle a little bit or my gosh, I don't have to hold everything together so tightly, right? And so what's happening in the nervous system when that happens is we're moving a bit more maybe out of a sympathetic activation state and more toward a settledness of ventral. We also might be inviting in a little bit of gentle dorsal energy along with the ventral that our body registers as restful. And sometimes with that rest, sometimes with that sense of relief, there can be a little bit of release. So sometimes tears come, and it's not usually the tears of like being in the throes of upset and overwhelm. Yeah, oftentimes it's the tears of just like, this is tender, right? I just touched a place that I didn't even know needed to be touched. And the part of me that was waiting for that is like, oh my God, thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Mhm.
Right. So there can be a little bit of like sadness with that, like bittersweetness. And if there are difficult things happening in our lives, presently. You know, one of the things I said about being more in ventral is that it helps us be capable of handling and holding and being with whatever's here. So if what's here in life right now are difficult things or hard things, and we offer the body safety, then that may give the body permission to like feel the appropriate sadness about something sad that is happening.
Mhm.
I
Thank
hope
you.
that makes sense.
It, it does. It's beautiful. Um, okay, a lot of these we have answered. There's some just logistical ones. Folks really enjoyed the session and they want to know if the video would be able to be available for people who didn't register for the session. We are going to be sending the email out, and I think you could forward that to folks. If that's not correct, I'll kind of check with our team. We'll make sure in the email that goes out that we offer an opportunity for folks who didn't register to register and then have access to the video. We definitely want to share this practice with everybody. Kristen, it was beautiful. We have a thank you from Catherine.
Mhm.
I will use this practice to become more aware of my body and to calm myself when I feel anxious. Thank you. So we're seeing lots of thank yous in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just have a few more minutes here, so I guess I would ask if there's any other questions, we can put them in the chat, or we can wrap up with some thank yous to Kristen for this wonderful kickoff to our self-care January, supporting our nervous systems. I know I feel much more grounded after
Uh,
practice.
Yeah, I'm so glad this feels like a good place to wrap up, I think, but I appreciate everybody's questions and all of your presence and participation and willingness to try something different, try something new. And it sounds
We
like
do,
a lot of you felt it was supportive, so I'm really pleased to see that.
and it
Thank
looks
you.
like we have one more question that I'm sorry I might have
Yeah, go ahead.
But it from the main chat, someone is asking about holding versus massaging.
hmm There are two different types of touch.
Mhm.
So, in the touch that we offered today, the focus was not on massaging, right? We're offering this like broad, deep pressure um, contact without any intention of like trying to move muscles around or trying to get things to loosen up. That's why, I mean, I was a massage therapist and body worker for years and years, so I love massage. And this is a little different, right? So is rubbing or massage wrong or bad? No, it's just a different type of touch. So if that's a type of touch that you enjoy offering yourself, and you feel drawn to do that in this practice, that I would say go with it. Um, the reason I don't often include that in this kind of touch practice is because people can associate rubbing and massage so much with like, I've got to get the knots out and I'm trying to get it's very like it can be agenda driven, right? And this kind of touch it's easier to like take that off the table. So that's just a little bit about where I'm coming from with it.
Mhm.
Both are great.
Thank you. And I have a personal question. This one comes from me. You had mentioned like it's okay to use this practice with someone else if they provide consent, and you had mentioned children. I have an 11-year-old, and I'm just wondering if there would be a different approach, or would you follow the same sequence if you were providing this practice to someone else?
Yeah, so when I have offered this practice to other people, and I do it in about the same way. One of the only things that is occurring to me that could be different is that if you're working with someone else, then and you're working on their arms, then you can use both of your hands around their arm if that feels good. So it could be more of a full embrace
Mhm.
around the arm or around the low leg, just because you have use of both of your hands. Um, and if you're doing that, check in with the other person, right? Make sure that they're the ones that are in charge, that this is not something that you want to try on them and they're just like indulging you, right? It's really important that our nervous systems have autonomy and that
Mhm.
they have choice. even and especially when they're receiving care, because it doesn't feel great to receive an intention of care from someone when you don't really want it or you don't want it right now.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. A few more questions are coming in. One is
Mhm.
around if you wanted to give deep massage or pressure, deep pressure to your feet, where would you start? The question is, would you start with the little toe and work towards the ankle, or how would you approach feet?
You can, well, you're talking to someone who is a certified reflexologist for years, so there's a zillion ways to approach feet. Um, I'm going to keep it simple to respond to that and go with what feels your deeper felt sense of what feels right and good. So maybe your brain has an idea of like, maybe I should do this. Then try that and sense how your body actually responds instead of like being in your brain and trying to plan it out. Try something and sense like, does that feel good? Does it feel bad? Does it feel neutral? What does it tell me about what my nervous system likes as opposed to what my brain thinks is a good idea?
Mhm. And when you're practicing, like say for yourself, if I'm gonna try this tomorrow, I'm feeling like for me, I came in with a lot of mobilized energy and this really helped settle me this practice. Would you
Mhm.
suggest starting with the arms again and then moving to the legs?
Um, a lot of times, so there's so much flexibility with these, right?
Mhm.
Um, just like I said, a lot of our bodies tend to be more receptive to touch further away from the core as opposed to close to or on the core. Same thing for our arms and our legs. A lot of bodies will be inherently more comfortable beginning to receive touch on the upper extremities versus starting on the lower extremities. That may not be true for your body, so it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's the reasoning behind starting with the arms as opposed to starting with the legs.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, thank you so much. This has been
Mm,
such a pleasure and such a nice way to kick off 2025. I really want to thank you on behalf of everybody. I'm not sure if you saw the chat, but so many people are feeling,
mm,
"Oh, everyone's giving, yeah, everyone can give Kristen some thank you waves." But it really feels like it really it helped welcome a lot of nervous systems. So thank you for providing this space and
wonderful.
opportunity for us. Um,
Oh,
as we close up today, I also just want to invite everyone, as we said before, we'll be sending out the video of Kristen's practice that you can review, share with friends. That'll be coming out in 48 hours via email. I'd also like to invite you to join us for our next session in our New Year's Journey to Self-Care, which is going to be January 10th from 12 to 1 Eastern. And it's going to be, we're going to be exploring polyvagal informed movement with Amber Gray. So again, Kristen, thank you so much for kicking this off.
mm.
Happy New Year. Thank you for
Happy New Year.
tools. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me, and thanks all of you again for joining. I hope to see you again sometime.